Welcome to Doc NYC's Q&A for television event. My name is Basil Siokos, and I'm the Director of Programming for Doc NYC. Joining me for the conversation is the Director of Television Event, Jeff Daniels, as well as Nick Meyer, the Director of The Day After, the focus of the documentary. Welcome to both of you, Jeff and Nick. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm just going to start by saying I was 10 years old, to date me. I was 10 years old when The Day After was broadcast, and I remember it very vividly because it felt like something special, and that I felt like I needed to see it because I knew everyone in school was going to talk about it, and I didn't want to miss out on it. It wasn't so much that I don't think at the time unconsciously understood like, oh, this is going to be something scary or a serious adult issue. It's just people are going to be talking about it. So I bought into the marketing hype for sure, even as a 10-year-old. Jeff, can you talk a little bit about your own experiences with the film at the time, or your memories of watching the film, and how you came down the road 35 years later or so to make a film about it?
Absolutely. I was 5 at the time the film came out, and I had no choice.
I was 8.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for ruining my childhood. But luckily, I about 40 members of my family piled into my grandparents' basement in Flushing, Queens, to watch this film. As were 100 million other Americans at the time. And they luckily had the sense to put me to bed before that iconic bombing sequence. So I wasn't completely ruined. But I watched the whole setup of the medical student trying to get his degree, the family trying to prepare for a wedding, all of these typical American stories of people trying to get on with their normal lives before it was ripped away from them. And I got it, even at 5, I got that in the event of a nuclear war, life would be unrecognizable. And I think the weight of that really stood with me. I was a typical Reagan baby in that way. I learned to not trust adults who said, it'll be fine. It's not going to happen. Don't worry about it. That cynicism, I think, was really rooted from that moment onwards. It was hard for me to trust adults and, who said that everything was going to be fine. So it stuck with me. And I think understanding and revisiting the story of how this film came about, seeing the different forces trying to come together, one, a TV network that is really trying to win this ratings war, as is their job every year. And on the other, a Hollywood director who has the intention of trying to unseat President Reagan. I thought this is going to be interesting. I need to look into this story.
And Nick, we hear in the film, obviously, about how you came to direct The Day After and the tumultuous behind the scenes process. But what was your initial reaction when you were approached by Jeff about revisiting this contentious time, let's say?
Well, the short answer to that is that I regard my involvement with the movie as the most worthwhile thing to date that I've probably ever got to do with my life. And to that extent, I would not like it to be forgotten. I would not like more importantly, I would not like the film to be forgotten. And to the degree that this documentary was aiming at focusing on that, I wanted to be all the help that I could be, even if I didn't always come out looking so great.
Oh.
I think you come off as the absolute hero of the project, but that's just me. Nick, you do talk, and this was just referenced by Jeff just a minute ago, but you do talk in the film about the not unambitious goal of using the film to actually unseat Ronald Reagan, as well as put the lie of this idea of an unwinnable war. But how upfront or how vocal were you during the film's production? I know that we see that the film becomes a contentious issue in the press later as it's nearing coming out, but did all the executives know that you had this grand idea of what this film was going to do politically?
Well, I don't know how vocal I was while making the film. I mean, privately to family or friends, I may have expressed some hubristic notions. but I had just enough common sense to keep my mouth shut the rest of the time, because I didn't want to compromise the movie. One of the things that I realized very early on in my involvement with the film was that if it became a piece of propaganda, it wouldn't work. It would be perceived as that, it would be doomed, it would be trashed. And then I thought, so I don't need to make it into a piece of propaganda. All I have to do is show what happens when you have a nuclear war, on a good day, I might add, and I'll have done the kind of damage that I wanted to do, which was really, from my perspective, a public service, because I believe that pictures are worth thousands and thousands of words, and that a lot of times, in particular, people you think ought to be able to visualize what you're talking about, whether you're talking about politicians or you're talking about network executives, they can't until you show it to them. And Ronald Reagan had a meeting with Helen Caldicott at one point, the anti-nuclear activist, Dr. Helen Caldicott, and he said something to the effect of, well, you can always call the missiles back. And she said, no, you can't. And this gives you an idea. Then there was a general on Castro's staff after the Cuban Missile Crisis who conceded that until he saw the movie, he hadn't understood what the missiles were really capable of doing, what this was all about.
Mm.
So try to get your mind around that. And I realized, okay, you don't have to make it propaganda. Never mind that privately you think you'd like to unseat Ronald Reagan and his descendants. But you didn't need to do that. In any case, the film, worked in ways that I could never have imagined with Ronald Reagan.
Right. That's great. That's great. Thank you. Jeff, turning to you in a little bit of sort of, again, behind the scenes and how the project came together, as signaled by the title of the film, the television event, like it was a legitimate special event. Again, we're remembering it decades later as something unique and memorable and a media sensation. But even so, did you have concerns when you were starting the process about tracking down details behind the production after so many years had passed? I mean, did you worry that people aren't going to remember this, they're not going to be talking about it, they're not going to have the records that I need to be able to really get a clear sense of what went behind the scenes?
When I started to talk with people, first my family members, remember going into the basement and watching the day after, they all remembered it vividly. It was so impactful. I mean, how could I not be influenced by the art of visual storytelling, by seeing how impactful 40 years later, 35 years later, this film still was. So I felt confident that if I reached the people who were behind the production, that they may have, there would be certain things there that would stick with them, and that would be what I'm after. And consistently, first with Nick, who was so generous with his time, he stayed with me for hours, answering every question that I had, and really just gave me the backbone of the details, filling in all the details behind the scenes of what happened, so that I was able to reach out to the right people, the producer, the writer, some of the TV executives, and members of the Reagan administration as well. They were all willing to talk. It was quite. I was amazed, and they did remember in detail some, and if they didn't remember, they intentionally didn't remember. So it made the film more interesting for that reason, and propelled me forward as I continued with the film.
One should, if I may, interject a thought or two about memory. Memory, it turns out, or memories turn out to be not infallible. We remember things imperfectly. When I wrote my memoir and published it, 2010, I said that trial lawyers will tell you that eyewitnesses are the worst witnesses. And that's what the movie Rashomon is all about.
Mhm.
I flatter myself at every opportunity, I might add, that I have a terrific memory. I have a terrific memory. There's a whole passages of Shakespeare's plays that I can reel off and put you to sleep with. But it also turns out that a few of my memories have been mistaken. And I've learned this. This is a sidebar, but somebody said, oh, when you were doing all those Star Trek movies, did you have a lot of interaction with Gene Roddenberry? And I said, gee, no, I think I met him on 2 and I had some interaction with him on 6, but really, you just went and sort of kissed the ring. And then I was at my alma mater, the University of Iowa, where my papers are, and somebody showed me a whole raft of correspondence on Star Trek II between me and Gene Roddenberry, rather vitriolic in both directions, I might add, of which I had no recollection at all. I had been answering the question wrongly. My memory was fallible. So what you look for in Jeff's movie, which I think is sort of one of its real assets, is the degree of consensus on the part of a lot of the people that he interviewed. Some of the details, specific things may be a little, at odds, but overall, it's like, you should pardon the expression, going to a funeral and listening to a whole bunch of people delivering eulogies and realize, yes, we're all talking about the same person. There is a general sense of what went down here. And that, I think, is one of the virtues of the documentary.
And sort of along the same lines on that, I mean, so when you hear other insiders who were on the production have different recollections than you, does that upset you? Does that bother you? The accusations of criticism of you being difficult, I should say, the criticism of you being difficult. How does that impact you at this point, hearing that after the fact?
Well, I want to be liked like everybody. But what I've learned over years in Hollywood making movies is that when somebody calls somebody difficult, what they usually mean is, oh, the guy really wanted to get it right, or the woman really wanted to get it right. And that was perceived, because this accusation, he was difficult, is usually something leveled by executives. He was difficult. What they mean is he didn't show up, punch the clock, and shut up and just get the shot. And in the case of the director, who is ultimately responsible for what's on the screen, yeah, I guess I plead guilty. Difficult. I don't think most people who the refrain I used to get, or I still get, is, gee, they told me you were really difficult, and I don't think you're so rough, tough, whatever. So I think it is sort of Rashomon. It depends with whom you are interacting. I think the perspective of the network is different, inevitably, from the people, the creative people who are involved. There are different objectives. There are different parameters. So I guess, at my advanced age, I'm closing in on 102, that I have to kind of roll with it, that there are people walking around who think I'm difficult.
And
So
this it gets to a really interesting point that I'm glad it manifested in the film. The fact that this TV movie of the week was a grand compromise from a director with vision, who they hired because of his vision, and a network that is family friendly, about to be bought out by Disney at that time. They wanted to make it watchable, family, primetime viewing. And
about nuclear war.
About nuclear war. And I think Stephanie Austin, the associate producer on the project, really was able to say, I was desperate to make it real. I wanted to make it as real as possible. And in the end, I saw that making a story that was more emotional and that did not in any way get to the reality of what nuclear war would really look like, it still gave the impact we all wanted at the end. And for that reason, it was successful. And for that reason, it reached 100 million people in the US, tens of millions worldwide. I had my own situation where I was trying to, I saw in the script that Edward Hume wrote and some of the storyboards that I looked at that showed a horse running away from the blast and then being incinerated by that blast, and in a way showing it just light on fire. And I thought, oh, got it, a horse on fire. What an incredible visual, representation of, so many things I'm trying to get out and how impactful. So I worked with this incredible graphic artist, motion graphic artist, Don Bartolo, to make a photoreal vision to bring this storyboard to life. And, I saw that it hadn't been used in the film. And when I showed it to people, they were turned off. One person who was a bit nuts thought, this is awesome, like me. And, but everyone else, they said, I just can't watch this. This is horrifying. And so I had my own moment where I realized I need to compromise here. I can't be as real as I wanted to be, as they wanted to be when they were making the day after. And because of that, perhaps the film is more accessible. So, this is how you make films, and this is how you make points. This is how people come together to discuss, despite their differences, important things so that they can come together and make decisions that change the world for the better.
I think filmmaking, largely like politics, or at least as politics used to be, is the art of the possible. And I didn't have to be a network executive to understand that television viewers with remotes in their hand could be repulsed to the point where they would change channels. So I think Stephanie, and by the way, I take a back seat to no man where my admiration for Stephanie Austin is concerned. I just think she's a terrific person and a terrific producer. We got along like a house on fire, and probably still do. But I think that compromise was not simply the family-friendly inclinations of ABC versus the, total realism of the director, the difficult one. But in fact, you didn't have to have a lot of brains to see that nobody had ever seen a movie like this on network television. Not just ABC, it could have been CBS. Nobody had seen it. And the trick was to get them not to shut it off. The sponsors saw it and headed for the hills. They were gone.
Yeah.
And that's without the burning horse.
Just a small side note, Stephanie Austin got her opportunity to make that real vision of a nuclear blast when she put together the bombing sequence for Terminator 2. She was the producer of Terminator 2. So that's when she was able to say, everything I really wanted to do in the day after, I'm going to do it here. And she did.
Yeah. Well, I have one last question, and I'm going to, Jeff, definitely pipe in if you'd like as well, but I'd like to ask Nick. Nick, we know that television and the world for that matter are very different today. Would a project with the ambitions of the day after be possible to produce now when we have thousands of channels, a 24-hour news cycle, and really no way to focus viewers on the same thing at the same time in any real way? Do you think television is really the medium by which we can sort of influence radical change?
Well, that is an enormously complicated question. I get letters and emails and phone calls from scientists all around the world asking if it isn't possible to remake this movie because there are certain people or a certain person who should see it. And I have gone around this town, not exhaustively, but regularly, with proposals for another version of this film. And the short answer to your question is met with no success. All these different venues that you go with now have their own demographics. The pie slices have there are more pie slices, but they're smaller. So we do males 18 to 24. We do history, American history, but we don't want to see Americans behaving badly. So it becomes very specific. You know, women won't watch this, blah, blah. It's harder to throw a net. And at that time, there were basically 3 networks. And there were sort of the water cooler moments afterwards. And television was more of a unifying force, I imagine, than it is now. Now, you know, we're all listening to our own radio station. And if you don't, you know, I don't watch Fox News, you know, I'll have heart failure. So we're all tuned to our own stations where we can at least listen to somebody who doesn't make our blood pressure rise. And I suppose filmmaking at this point for television, if you find the right place where you're catering to the right group of people, yes, but I think you can expect that a lot of the other people who were roped in by the original Day After, wouldn't be there this time around. I still think it's worth doing, by the way.
And how unfortunate. Oh, sorry. Well, how unfortunate that we're missing out on this opportunity where we can bring as many people together in the same place at the same time to connect emotionally with an otherwise indigestible subject like nuclear war. These opportunities, especially now when we're really desperate to try and get people with differing political views together in the same room to have this shared experience and to then talk about it with urgency. It seems like that is a crucial thing in terms of how democracy works. It's a process. You need to talk with each other. We need to come to compromises. We need to hear each other out. And this film provided that opportunity for a nation that at that time was quite polarized. This is why this film in a way gives me hope, because at one time in our history, we came together and talked with urgency about these vast global issues. And we were able to put this to a president who really changed the way that he talks about nuclear war. I fear that we don't have opportunities like that, but if anything comes from this film, I hope that we can remind each other, this is possible. We did this once. We can do this again.
That's great. And on that note, I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up. What a great conversation. Thank you so much for speaking with me, both Jeff and Nick. And thanks so much for making Television Event and for bringing it to Doc NYC. I'm very happy to have it as part of the festival. And thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a privilege.